Alcohol, considered the root of all evil and threat to the American family. Following the American Revolution, many Americans began to drink in excess. Men drank to show they were men, but their excess drinking led to social conflicts. Wives and children were being abused. On average, Americans over 15 years old drank the equivalent of 88 bottles of whiskey each year. More money was being spent on alcohol than spent by the federal government. Many men lost their jobs, resulting in the inability to provide for their families. As part of the early temperance movement, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, or the WCTU, was organized in support of Prohibition. Women and children were being abused, and society blamed excess drinking. 50 years later, Prohibition had resulted in decreased tax revenue, cultivated organized crime, and increased drinking throughout the middle and upper classes, all negatively impacting the American family. The Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform, or WONPR, was formed with a goal set on prohibition repeal. Both organizations took conflicting positions on alcohol with a targeted outcome to save the American family. The early temperance movement was set into motion shortly after the American Revolution. Crusades to save the American family were underfoot. By the 1840s, the Cold Water Army was formed. Girls and boys pledged never to touch alcohol. This led to the formation of the Women's Temperance Society. However, the momentum of the early temperance movements was overshadowed by the Civil War. Inspired by Dr. Dio Lewis's lecture, The Duty of Christian Women in the Cause of Temperance, Eliza Thompson set out on December 24, 1873, to begin the Women's Crusade against alcohol. Through prayer, the singing of hymns, and picket lines preventing the delivery of alcohol, women invaded saloons and demanded bartenders and druggists to sign pledges against alcohol. Their efforts were met with great resistance. After inviting them inside, saloon keepers drenched them with buckets of beer before pushing them out into the snow. The Women's Crusade efforts grew quickly. They marched in 911 communities across 31 states. Within 2 years, the organization's momentum began to decline, but soon gave birth to the Women's Christian Temperance Union, known as the WCTU. Beginning in 1879, Frances Willard led the WCTU to become a major nonviolent influencer for Prohibition. Within 9 years, Frances had grown her army to more than 250,000 women. She spoke in more than 1,000 towns across the country, including all towns with 10,000 citizens or more, pleading for their support in banning alcohol. By 1890, the WCTU had representation in over half the country. History books recognize Frances Willard for her crusade efforts that led to the collection of nearly 1 million signatures on the Polyglot Petition in support of banning alcohol globally. The WCTU grew to over 45 departments that focused on not only banning alcohol but also street children, fallen women, female matrons for women's prisons, free kindergarten for all children, equal pay for equal work, to name a few. No program had a greater impact than the Department of Scientific Temperance Instruction, which focused on educating boys and girls to eradicate alcohol use through the public school system. Mary Hunt was appointed by Frances Willard to lead the department. Her efforts were focused on influencing legislators and ensuring the content of textbooks conformed with the WCTU's views. Over time, 22 million school-aged children were being taught temperance classes 3 times a week. Classes included stories meant to terrify young children. The WCTU had the idea that they would influence the next generation of voters by instilling a fear of alcohol. In 1900, fueled by the death of her first husband and abuse by her second husband, Carrie Nation began her own crusade against alcohol in the state of Kansas. Carrie set out on a mission to destroy saloons across the state. Carrie was a member of the WCTU. However, her acts of violence were never supported by the WCTU. Hundreds of women rallied around Carrie and called themselves the Home Defenders Army. Together, they destroyed bars and warehouses that stored alcohol across the state. Carrie was known for the hatchet she carried and used to smash barrels of alcohol and destroy bars. She was jailed numerous times and released. Within a month, her followers had attacked at least 100 saloons in 50 different towns. To intervene in the destructive activity, Kansas legislators took measures to enact a law that would straighten existing laws. After the death of Frances Willard in 1898, the WCTU's primary focus returned to Prohibition. In 1893, the Anti-Saloon League was formed by Wayne Bidwell Wheeler. The league had ample financing, numerous volunteers, and the ability to pay staff, which led to a strong religious movement. His efforts grew to overshadow the women's efforts and decades of working for temperance. The unimaginable happened in 1913 when the 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution passed, allowing the federal government to collect personal income taxes. No longer was the government dependent upon the revenue generated from taxes on the manufacturing, importing, exporting, and the sale of alcohol. By 1919, the country's opinion on prohibition began to change. The 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, known as the Volstead Act, was completed in January 1919 and took effect on January 17, 1920. It is important to note that the 18th Amendment did not prohibit the consumption of alcohol. While the membership in the WCTU steadily declined following the passage of the 18th Amendment, the organization continued to operate in the public school system. The outgrowth from prohibition on society proved to bring the unthinkable. The middle and upper classes were drinking more, increased number of women were being treated for alcoholism, and organized crime became prevalent. While sitting in a congressional hearing, Pauline Sabin heard Ella Bull, the president of the WCTU, shout out, "I represent the women of America." Appalled by Ella's claim, she began her own crusade to repeal prohibition. While it was true that Pauline once supported prohibition, thinking it would be best for her young sons and would protect them from the temptations that came with alcohol, her views quickly changed. Pauline openly stated that the prohibition law was written for weaklings and derelicts, had divided the nation like Gaul into three parts: wets, dries, and hypocrites. Pauline was the first woman to lead the Women's National Republicans Club. She remained loyal to the Republican Party until after the election of Herbert Hoover in 1928. Filled with disgust because of the president's lack of interest in dealing with the issue of prohibition, led Pauline to resign her position with the Republican National Committee and set forth to form the Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform, known as WONPR. The organization's sole goal was to repeal prohibition, which directly conflicted the position taken by the WCTU. As a prominent and well-respected leader in society, Pauline recognized the need to welcome women from every sector of the country to be successful. Rallies were held, and before long, 1.5 million women had signed on to support her crusade. The WONPR gained massive recognition through the media, and the growing success was noticed by male politicians who came to recognize that a repeal of prohibition might be possible with the involvement of women. The WONPR and the WCTU both used the same platform to argue their cause. The WCTU believed the threat to the American family was alcohol, while the WONPR argued it was prohibition. The 18th Amendment was repealed with the passage of the 21st Amendment to the U.S. Constitution on December 5, 1933. Amidst the cheering of the legislature, Ella Bull, president of the WCTU, could be heard weeping by what had just occurred. Looking back, history has proven women played crucial roles in the enactment of prohibition and its repeal.